This is the Two-Tone Uncensored Podcast. Hosts Matt Necrone, Ryan Moreland, and Glenn Lotzenheiser talk everything Tennessee Titans. This show is made for the fans that bleed two-tone blue.
This is Justin Hartwig, and you're listening to Two-Tone Uncensored.
Hello and welcome to Two-Tone Uncensored. I'm one of your hosts, Ryan Moreland. With me tonight, as always, the man with the earliest bedtime in all of show business, Matt Necrone. How you doing, Matt?
I'm ready for bed, man.
I don't doubt it. And also joining us tonight, the poor man's Carl Klug, Glenn Lotzenheiser. How you doing, Glenn?
You know what? That's a compliment. I'll take that. I'm good with that.
I knew you'd like it.
Yeah, I'm down.
He's more of like a poor man's Brian Schwenke.
Fuck you, Matt. Fuck you very much. You know, I never fucked your mother. Why are you acting like that towards me?
Yeah, man, Schwenke was a class act until now.
Fuck that guy.
All right. Before we jump into the show, I just wanted to mention this real quick. On the Tennessee Titans Uncensored Facebook page, they're doing a first-round mock draft pool. There's going to be prizes for the first five. They're the top five mock drafts. So get your picks in. The deadline is March 10th to get your picks in, and then you can switch up and change your mock all the way up until a half hour before the draft actually starts. The scoring, 1 point for the correct pick position, 1 point for the correct pick number, 2 for the player, 3 for if you get the Titans pick correct, and you can add in trades, and that'll actually help you out with points if you call trades correctly. To play, just go to the Tennessee Titans Uncensored Facebook page. The post is pinned to the top, so you'll see exactly where it is. All you got to do is just throw in your name right there, and you'll be entered in order to try to win. There's some great prizes. If you're into cards, there's a lot of great stuff. Mariota, rookie card with a piece of the jersey. Javon Ringer, triple patch jersey rookie card. Chris Johnson, autographed rookie card. Jack Conklin, autographed rookie card. So a lot of really great prizes there that you can end up winning. It's free to play. There's no buy-in or anything. So if that sounds like something you'd want to do, definitely check it out on Tennessee Titans Uncensored Facebook page.
Is the Javon Ringer one if you lose?
The way it works for picking is whoever wins first gets to pick which one they want, and then second place picks with what's left, third place, so on and so forth. So whoever finishes fifth, I imagine, will end up with that Ringer card.
Lucky them.
I know. Definitely put it above the mantle. Tell your kids about it. We don't have anything in the mailbag today. We only got one question. We're going to cover that a little bit later. So we're going to skip the mailbag today and jump right into the news. So, Glenn, what do you have in the news for us?
I thought we'd do a little bit of discussion about the coaching carousel. Just kind of go over the change we've seen, get some general opinions of them, and just discuss a little bit about what's happening around the league, you know, as far as people that we're going to have to deal with as Titans. The biggest thing that I think I've seen that, you know, kind of surprised me was the John Lynch hiring as the GM of the 49ers. They gave him a 6-year contract for a guy that's never worked in the NFL as anything other than just a player. We know he's been an analyst the last few years. I'm really stunned by the hire. It kind of makes me feel like I had a shot. I wish I'd called them up. He's probably a Hall of Famer as a safety, but what does he have to do as a GM to succeed in this league?
I like John Lynch a lot. You know, as a player, he was an inspiration for me growing up. He's a guy that I tried to model my game after, and I think he's for sure Hall of Famer. But you brought it up, zero experience in working in a front office, zero coaching experience, zero, personnel experience. A very questionable call for me. I think everybody around the league's been saying the same thing. He's a very likable guy, a hell of a player during his time. But it just doesn't make any sense to hire him, especially to a 6-year deal like this. I don't know. Definitely a head scratcher. I think to be successful in the league at this job, he needs to surround himself with people that are really good and really know what they're doing, and be open to letting them take over for the first couple of years until he can really learn what he's doing. And if he does that, he might be able to turn this into a successful run, but I don't know. This is a real questionable call.
I know, obviously, he was a Tampa Bay Buck. Was he a Bronco? I believe he was.
Yes, yeah.
I'm pretty sure that's where this ties into. Obviously, it kind of took me off guard, as it did you guys, but he played for Coach Shanahan, and they're bringing in Kyle as the Niners coach. So there's probably a tie there. But I do kind of like it. It's out of the box, but knowledgeable guy, and I think that he may not have immediate success right away, but I think eventually it could turn into something special. I'm not against the move.
The nice thing for Lynch is nobody's expecting a lot from him, so the bar's set real low. So any small amount of success, he's going to look like a genius.
Yeah, and on the 49ers, the small amount of success is probably right. The thing is I think you guys both touched on it. Friend of Shanahan, who they're planning on bringing in, he knows the family. Maybe they're hoping that he can get the dad to come back in for a little bit. I think Ryan touched on it too, though, is he's going to have to surround himself with guys that know how to do their job. He's going to have to put people in place to help him out. Guys with really good scouting experience. He's going to have to find himself someone to run that scouting department. Somebody to handle the player contracts, because he's never really done much of that. So I'm really curious to see if he's more of a leader by example and is steering the team in the right direction and allowing other people, other football guys to come in and do their job, or if he goes in there and tries to run the show. That'll determine a lot about how this goes for him, early on. He's got 6 years, but we all know that means nothing in the NFL. Sometimes they'll just write you a check to send you on your way. I'm really curious to watch that situation develop there.
Yeah, I think GM, obviously it's a huge responsibility, but pretty sure all three of us think we could do it, even though we probably couldn't. But
I'm willing to try.
Yeah, it's a lot easier to me. It would be. I feel like I would do a better job at being a GM than I would an actual positional coach, Wes Welker or somebody.
There you go. Yeah, and so as we discussed, they're expected to hire Kyle Shanahan. The things I'm hearing, listening to the NFL Network and Sirius Satellite and all that, is that he's expected to also get a 6-year deal and match it up with Lynch. A 6-year deal is a long time to give to a rookie GM, with no experience, and also then you're giving that to a rookie head coach. If they end up doing 6 and 6, is that too long of a term to give to Shanahan, or do you think that's the price they had to pay to get him to leave the Falcons?
Probably the price you had to pay. Shanahan's had a lot of success, and I know he's a young guy, and he doesn't have any head coaching experience, but he has the pedigree. He's had nothing but success, in every position that he's held so far. You talk to everybody that's worked with him or been around him, they all love him. And even when he had a little bit of problem with Matt Ryan at first, because Matt Ryan didn't really believe in his system, and he got Matt Ryan on board, and now they're playing for a Super Bowl. I think the success that he's had, you're really going to force their hand in order to get him out of that situation. Because, why not? If the deal's not exactly what you want, stay there. You're getting paid millions of dollars. You're going to get another championship run. You're still going to be a contender. You have a great quarterback. The incentive to leave has to be, I'm making way more money and I'm getting a contract that's very friendly to me. For Kyle Shanahan in the position that he's in.
Do you guys recall when we brought John Robinson in, how long his initial deal was? I know he just got promoted, but
it was just 2 or 3 years, wasn't it?
I don't understand how. He's a first-time GM as well, but he's got way more background than John Lynch does. So I really don't understand why it's 6 years if that's the case.
I think it's a question of motivation. He wanted to be the GM of the Titans because he's a Titans fan. He grew up in Tennessee, whereas John Lynch, he would like to run the show, obviously, and he's very motivated to go be a GM. But he also told, the 49ers, from what I've read, that they had to keep it a secret if they actually wanted to hire him, because he didn't want to screw up the rest of his career and have people talking, if he wasn't going to get that shot. And so maybe, it came down to the 49ers are going to have to beg people to come coach their squad right now because it's such a mess. The Colin Kaepernick deal last year, that's going to be an issue for a guy like John Lynch. I don't know that he'll put up with it as far as, protesting and making a spectacle of himself on the sidelines. I think maybe that 6-year deal was because they had to get somebody to come in, and they saw it as part of having to get a Shanahan in there. So maybe they just wanted to make the deal where they had to match it up, and both guys get huge contracts or long contracts just to start out and make that match up. All right, Rex Ryan, he's going to be an ESPN analyst for the Sunday Countdown leading up to the Super Bowl. Obviously, we know he got fired as the Bills head coach. We've talked about him being a better coordinator than a coach in the past. Do you think he takes a year off, works as an analyst, and then comes back? We've seen that move a couple times. Or is this going to end up being his career, and he's just going to be an analyst from here on out? I mean, he's a relatively young guy. He's in his 40s. So for a coach, that's pretty young.
Yeah, I think he does take the year off. He's more of a personality than he is anything, in my opinion. So I think he'll fit in well at ESPN. He will probably get back into coaching. He may not get, a head coaching spot right off the bat, but I do think he could work his way back up and start out as a good defensive coordinator because that's obviously what he does best.
Yeah, the one thing for me is you're not seeing a lot of guys transition back anymore. That'd be the thing to watch for is you see these guys get the job with ESPN or, CBS or Fox or whoever, and, Cowher and Gruden, they just stay there. It's a lot less pressure. The hours are a lot more manageable. The pay's close to the same, and it's not taking years off your life like coaching does. So I think it's hard, I think, to make that decision to want to come back to football after you're still in football. You still get to do a lot of things that you like to do without doing a lot of the headache kind of stuff that you don't like to do. A lot less pressure on you, a lot less work involved. So that'd be something to look forward to if he does come back. I think he'd be a great addition, though. He's obviously, like Matt said, he's a personality. He's a guy that if you had – there was a thing that I believe was Bleacher Report put out a few years ago where they asked players around the league, if you could grab a beer with any coach that's not your coach, who would it be? And it was like overwhelmingly Rex Ryan won. He's just that kind of guy. He's the guy, if you had to go grab a beer with him, that's the guy you'd go with because he is such a character. But I don't know. It's hard for me to say he'll make his way back just because we're not seeing a lot of guys do it in recent years. They seem that once they get in that cushy job, they stay.
Yeah, but the one difference between those guys and Rex Ryan, all those guys were successful at what they did. Dungy won a Super Bowl. He's in that spotlight. Gruden won a Super Bowl. He doesn't need to go back. He has got the best job in America, really. Cowher won a Super Bowl. He has no intent of coming back. Rex Ryan hasn't been to that level of success, and eventually I do think he'll be back in there.
Yeah, that was going to be my follow-up. I was going to ask, as a question of success, Ryan still has stuff to prove as a head coach. Those other guys, like Matt just said, they don't. They've already succeeded. They've been to the promised land. Ryan never managed that. So, like Matt just said, there's a chance that he comes back just because he's still hungry or, pride. Right. He still has something to prove. Whereas these other guys, they've done it. They don't really need to come back. There's nothing for them to prove anymore. It's nice to be courted every single year. Cowher, Chucky, those guys, I think they enjoy the attention that, their name keeps coming up as a possible head coach again, but they don't have to work for it anymore. They're superstars in the NFL without having to do any of the NFL hours, without having to sit there and film study and all that other stuff. They can just do what they want to do and have fun with it and, work for 3 hours a day at most.
It's rough.
And to clarify, you're talking about Rex Ryan, not me, because I'm a hell of a football coach. I have something like 28 championships at this point on Madden.
Yeah, on Madden. Okay, so, speaking of the Bills, they hired Sean McDermott. He was the defensive coordinator for the Panthers the last few seasons. He's expected to bring the Panthers' current linebacker coach, Holcomb, with him. The Bills have the pieces to be a fairly stout defense. They've got some explosive players there. They've got a good front seven. So it makes sense to bring in a defensive guy, somebody whose thing is defense, to help work with that defense. But following Rex Ryan, who was also a defensive guy, do you think they should have maybe gone with an offensive guy, or is it right to bring in another defensive-minded head coach and just make this the Shady show since they don't have a quarterback?
I think what you have to do is, you could do it either way, but you need to get another guy in there that is offensive-minded. They need to get a guy in there that can play offensive football. I mean, how long has it been since the Bills had a good offense? How long has it been since they've had a good quarterback? I mean, it seems like it's been forever. They need to get a guy in there that can change the way that this team is looked at. Because every single year it seems like the Bills have a competitive defense and a horrible offense. It seems like that's been the trend, since Jim Kelly left, pretty much. They need to get someone in there that can make a difference. They need to draft a quarterback that can be their future of this team. I don't think Taylor's it. I think that you need to bring in a guy that can be your franchise quarterback there. But McDermott's I think is a good hire. He's a good football coach. He was one of the biggest names last offseason and stayed put. And even though the Panthers struggled this year, it had a lot to do with those really young corners they had on the outside, getting exposed week in and week out. But I think he'll do a good job in Buffalo. I think that he can help get this ship turned around, but he needs to go out and hire himself a really good offensive coordinator to come in and try to make a difference on this offense.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, not too long ago, a couple years ago, when Rex Ryan came into Buffalo, their defense was top of the league, and a defensive-minded coach like Rex Ryan, who's been known to have these great Super Bowl caliber defenses, they couldn't get out of their own way. So McDermott, I'm familiar with him through he was with Philadelphia as well before Carolina, and Ryan was just talking about bringing in somebody with an offensive mind, which obviously they need to do. Tyrod Taylor's probably not the answer in Buffalo. I was actually talking about this with somebody the other day. Back when there was a Rex Ryan tie, we could see maybe Deshaun Watson going at number 12 to Buffalo, and Carolina's defensive coordinator, Sean McDermott, who's now the head coach, Panthers and Clemson Tigers have a little in-state tie. Well, not really in-state, but close enough. So we'll see what happens, but I do think they need to figure out who they're going to go with and basically start from scratch on that offense because they don't have too many pieces in place right now.
Yeah, and that was one of the things I was going to mention actually was, the possibility of that is a spot that Watson ends up landing at because they've pretty much already said they're cutting ties with Tyrod Taylor. That's actually kind of already in the works. So if they're not going to have Tyrod, Watson kind of makes sense there towards that middle of the first round. Like Matt just said, he just pointed out all the connections. They're there. It's kind of set up for that to be Watson's landing spot.
And the thing is if you getting McDermott right now, if he can be successful and he can get a good offensive coordinator in and then get Watson in or, whoever, get a franchise quarterback and work through the first 3 years of struggling, like quarterbacks do, anybody getting adjusted to the league, struggling, and then get it all together in, year 3, year 4, you're looking at a Tom Brady-less AFC East. That could be right when you're getting good, and it could set you up for this Bills franchise to be dominant at the perfect time, when the Patriots don't have a Tom Brady anymore, maybe not even a Bill Belichick anymore, and take over and really cement themselves as the best team in the NFC East, because obviously they're not going to do it while Tom Brady's there, but if they can time it right, and the timing is perfect here, if they can get a guy in, get him good, go through those first couple years, and then have him on solid footing right when he starts to hit his prime, and then you could take over this division.
That's a solid point, Ryan.
I'm not sure who the GM is in Buffalo, but they also do have a couple Clemson guys already with Sammy Watkins and Shaq Lawson, so it's not as far-fetched as it may seem, but I think it's actually a really good fit.
Yeah, so you heard it here first. That's Matt's pick for the first round for the Bills. We're going on. The Chargers, they hired former Bills interim head coach and offensive coordinator Anthony Lynn. He's going to be their head coach now, and there's talk about him bringing in the Jags ex-coach, Gus Bradley, to be their defensive coordinator. Is this a positive change for Phillip Rivers? We saw what went on in Buffalo with the offense. One game was good, one game was bad, possibly the result of just not having the quarterback. But also, is this a good thing for the Chargers, bringing in a guy who is known for having just a plain vanilla defense in Bradley?
Starting off answering the first part of your question, NFL.com ranked this as the best coaching hire of so far of the offseason. Lynn, a very offensive-minded guy. I know he's not really a household name, but he is a guy that he can do a lot with the offense. He can do a lot of things. He's a smart offensive guy. Now, I like that for Phillip Rivers. Phillip Rivers is such a good damn quarterback in this league, and it's just a shame that he's been stuck on teams that are just as bad as they are. And, we've talked about it before on the show, and I won't get into it too much, but you need to get a guy in there that can bring weapons in and just help him succeed. You don't need a great coach to have a great offense in San Diego because you have a fantastic quarterback. You need to get weapons and just let that guy run the offense. Let the offense run through Phillip Rivers. Let him do his thing, and you can win football games. On the other side, you have a defense that has a lot of holes in it, but filled a huge one in that defensive line last year by getting a guy like Joey Bosa in there. And that defensive line actually looked pretty good this season. I know for Titans fans it might not look that good because the game we played against them, we did pretty good on that offensive front. But for the most part, Joey Bosa had a great year last year. This defensive line had a good year. They have a lot of questions in the secondary, though. They need to get some weapons. I thought, on the second part of your question here, that Gus Bradley was the wrong pick. We saw Gus Bradley had a really good defense on paper last year, and that's the only place that they were good was on paper. He is, like you said it perfectly, Glenn. It's vanilla. It's very vanilla. It's ultra conservative. He doesn't have any testicles in his pants, and he doesn't go for anything. He hardly blitzes. I think that somehow Dick LeBeau got all of the nutsack that Gus Bradley was supposed to have because LeBeau will blitz on every damn play and doesn't give a shit. The Gus Bradley is the exact opposite. He's vanilla, he's boring, and and vanilla and boring in the NFL often loses you games on the defensive side of the ball.
I concur. Nothing to add. Nothing important or interesting anyway.
All right, then. We're going to stay over in that part of the country. The Rams have hired Sean McVay as their head coach. He's got a 5-year deal. He's the youngest head coach in the modern NFL era. He was the Redskins offensive coordinator, and last week we talked about how pass-heavy that offense has been and how badly they needed a running back. Well, now he's going to a team that has a pretty good running back, but serious questions at the quarterback position. They didn't even start the number one pick in the draft for the longest time this year. We all agree they need to move on from Fisher, so no complaints, in who they've signed. But since we own the Rams' first-round pick this year, and they're definitely going to have to go with Goff because they don't have a reasonable shot at a better quarterback. Do you think McVay can fire up the young man's career, or does this team have too many problems to succeed this coming season?
I think McVay's system is quarterback friendly. It's not complicated to run. It opens up a lot in the passing game. I like Kirk Cousins. I think Kirk Cousins is a good quarterback, but a lot of his success, I think, had to do with McVay's system. Getting a lot of space, getting guys open. The problem is you need a lot of guys you need some weapons for the system to work. And right now you have Todd Gurley, who's a fantastic young running back, but outside of that you got Tavon Austin, who's a weapon if you can get him in open space, and that's kind of the end of the list. You need to get some more guys in there that can do more with the football in order for this offense, I think, to really work. But one thing, my favorite story, I think, so far on these head coaching hires is McVay's first day comes in and throws a pizza party yesterday with the Rams front office, trying to mend some bad relationships, that have been going on in the Rams front office. So I thought that was just a kind of funny story. But really young guy, but I think his system could work there. And it's simple enough that I think that a guy like Goff could have some success in there. But I think they need to get some guys in there that can do more with the football, yards after the catch kind of guys. And I have one in Tavon Austin. I don't have much faith in Kenny Britt or whoever else is out there still.
I think Britt's a free agent, but I agree with you. The only thing I'll stress from what you just said is that it's going to take a lot of time for this to develop. I don't think they have nearly enough pieces around Jared Goff to succeed. I think Goff's in better hands with McVay as opposed to Jeff Fisher and anybody that was on Fisher's staff, just as a quarterback standpoint. But like I just said, it's definitely going to take some time. I don't see the Rams making any splashes this year, and I don't see Jared Goff developing this year. I think it's going to take at least 2 years to even start talking about that.
Here's my question is, McVay coming in, how long do you give Jared Goff? Do you think they'll be looking for a quarterback maybe next year or even as early as this year?
That's up to McVay, I guess, but that's not his guy. I'm not really sure why they even went with Jared Goff. I would have taken Carson Wentz for one, but I'm sure they give him this year for sure. You have to. You have no other choice. But if he struggles in a system that they're going to run, and they're going to run it, the thing is McVay is stuck with him this year, but McVay is also definitely guaranteed to be there in 2 years. So Jared Goff may or may not be at that point, whether he's a backup or what role he plays, I don't know. But if he struggles hard enough, then I could see them going elsewhere.
Yeah, he has the potential to be one of the biggest busts in NFL history. It really is stunning how bad he looked this year for being that high of a pick. I'm really curious to see what happens with it. I agree with you guys. It won't happen this season. There's just too many problems in that team. But, we'll see what happens. I think that they know they can't really look for a quarterback this year unless they find the Dak Prescott in the second round. That first-round pick being ours really hinders them year one going in. I think it made this job less exciting just because of that. But at the same time, if you know you're going to suck this year, you have a year to come in, do your discovery, find your players, see who wants to be on this team, see who wants to be a successful NFL player. And then going into the next year, you have no problem cutting anybody you've got to cut and just doing what you've got to do and developing the team from there. So I think this year is probably a freebie for him, and we'll just see what happens going forward.
I also wanted to ask this with this hiring, too. Is McVay's not a guy that you hear a lot about. He's obviously the youngest head coach. Do you think that, not having that first-round pick, giving away a lot in that trade to us, and thank God that they did, but giving all that away, not having a first-round pick, having a quarterback that not a lot of people in the NFL have any faith in, do you think that McVay, how far down the list do you think McVay was before they realized, we're not going to get who we wanted, or do you think McVay was towards the top of that list?
Let me just start off by saying Jeff Fisher fucked that organization so good, and I love him for it. But McVay had to be on, reasonably close to the top of that list because that franchise moving to LA, brand new start. I would think it's a well sought out after job. If that makes any sense, I don't even know what I just said. But you got to think, because I've never heard of McVay. I didn't pay attention to the Redskins offense that closely last season. Obviously, he's a young guy, the youngest head coach in the league right now. But obviously, he's got to have something that they like. And I don't know if it's just that they want to start completely fresh. And I think they realize they fucked up, not only with Jeff Fisher, but the fact of the trade and everything else. I think that they realize how big of a hole that they're in.
Yeah, the fact that they didn't fire their GM, mid-season kind of stunned me. It just the Rams organization is such a clusterfuck. Since the days of the greatest show on turf, they have been just awful, just dismantling the team and signing people to bad contracts. I think he was probably fairly high on their list, and like Matt said, there's a lot of things to like about going to that organization because they have a winning history. They have a brand new, gorgeous stadium. They're in a great spot for getting players to come to your town. So it's more attractive for free agents. Everything is there and in place for this team to be successful, except for talent. They're going to have to fix that. But I think that he was probably high on their list. And after he got in there and had just had a chance to look around and talk to them a little bit, I think they were pretty high on his list right away, too. The last thing I've got, Mike Mayock said that this is probably the best tight end draft class he has ever seen. Given that we've identified tight end as an area of need, and the tight ends showed up at the Senior Bowl and played really well, who are your top 2 or 3 tight ends at this point?
Even with the injury, Jake Butt's up there. He's a fantastic guy. He's like a complete package kind of a guy. He blocks well, catches the ball well. He's big and physical. He's agile. He's got good hands. He's exactly what you want in a total package, especially for a downhill running scheme like us. A great guy to have that can block that well. And then you have David Njoku's really flying up draft boards. The kid out of Miami. I got to watch them play WVU in the bowl game this year, and West Virginia has a good defense and has been a good tackling defense, the whole season. And he was breaking tackles left and right. It was like every single time he caught the ball, he was guaranteed to break one tackle. Had a really fantastic game. He was a big reason why Miami blew West Virginia out of the water, and why they had as good of a season as they had was that he was such a talented football player, and he's really flying up draft boards now. I like him a lot. Not as solid as a blocker though. And then I think O.J. Howard right now is my top tight end. Fantastic young athlete. He has good blocking. I think guys can shed him a little too easily sometimes, but he has the size that I think you can coach that out of him. Obviously, an unbelievably freakish kind of athlete. A lot to like there. Those three guys, I think, in my opinion, are kind of like consensus, top tight ends right now. But Mayock's right. It's heavy loaded at the top. There's some great talent at the top of this class, but then it's thick all the way through. This is a great tight end draft class. There's a lot of guys that I think are going to be something special, going to be good tight ends in the league, or have the potential to be at least.
Yeah, I agree. Watching the Senior Bowl, O.J. Howard definitely stuck out. He didn't have to be there. He had something to prove. I always thought that he was kind of a little overrated up until this process, but he killed us in both national title games at Clemson. He is probably the number one tight end overall coming out. I've never actually seen David Njoku. I've heard a lot of good things about him. But I will say Evan Engram, he's not a very good blocker, but he's a great route runner, good receiver, pretty fast. I think he's going to go probably mid-second round. And then my guy, Jordan Leggett out of Clemson. I've seen him make plenty of plays. He doesn't show up every game, which is what I don't like about him. But when he does show up, he's definitely a threat. O.J. Howard probably stands out a little bit above the rest, but after that, the second tier is a good group of guys.
Yeah, I thought that this lined up really well for us, just like all of the good offensive linemen racked up for us last year. This year, tight end's an issue. There's enough guys that we don't have to spend our first-round pick on a tight end to have someone who can definitely contribute for a long time going forward. O.J. Howard, Ingram, and Njoku, ever since Ryan brought him up a while back, I keep hearing that guy's name and being impressed with the things I'm seeing about him. So he's definitely climbing on my board. But Butt is the guy that I think is the most reasonable expectation for us if we don't do a bunch of moving around, because that injury is going to keep him out of the combine. It's going to keep him. It kept him from having a chance to show up in the postseason for college, doing the Senior Bowl, things like that. It's going to hurt his draft stock just because these other guys are getting a chance to show up and play well. And it's such a deep class that teams will be less likely to take a chance on him. So I think Jake Butt is a guy that we have a reasonable shot at getting in the third round if we don't do any other moving around. But again, lots of guys in this class have a chance to contribute. John Robinson, we were talking about before the show, Ryan was bringing up how much the Patriots organization was praising him and his ability to find those small school guys. He knows what to look for. He knows how to dig up players. So I think that one way or another, the tight end position gets addressed, whether it's a star-type player like the guys that we're talking about, or if he just finds that guy that we've never heard of, like Byard, that just shows up and all of a sudden he's our next great tight end. One way or the other, though, I think that we fix it this draft class because this is the time to do it.
And what was Butt's injury? He tore his ACL, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely a good value pick if we can get him in the third for sure. I don't know that we're going to target him there, but I have a feeling that, somebody might go ahead and try to reach for him earlier than that.
Yeah, it's definitely possible.
Yeah, I don't see him making it to the third as much as I'd like to see him drop to us because I think he is. If he comes back from that injury, I think he's the most talented overall, a complete package tight end in the draft class. And then, I think Howard has a ton of upside. Njoku, I think, is fantastic, but his blocking worries me a little bit. But I think if Jake Butt, if he comes back healthy, I think he's the best of the class. So I think you're going to see someone take a chance on him in the second. It would even surprise me if it was early second, to be honest.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't be surprised either. That's why I think we should be trading back into the second round if that's what we want to, if we're shooting at a tight end. Because a lot of these guys are going to disappear before the third round rolls around. I mean, the guys that we talked about, none of these are guys are third round guys. Maybe Everett is a guy that drops into that group. Ingram is probably a second, third round guy, but I think he goes in the second round because the offensive linemen aren't there this year. The wide receivers, there's a few really good wide receivers and not much else there. So it's going to be a defensive draft and guys that play positions that you need but you don't normally draft high, like tight end, that end up going. I'm really hoping he could drop far enough, or else that we make a move that lets us still make really good picks in the first round, but pick up a second-round pick in there somewhere so we can target a guy like that. So that's what I've got for the coaching carousel and our news around the NFL.
Before we head into the commercial real quick, guys, we have the biggest game of the year coming up this week, the Super Bowl, of course, Falcons versus the Patriots. So we're going to just real quick, talk about what you think is going to be some key matchups to watch in this game, and who do you think is going to take it?
I do like what Atlanta brings to this game, but at the same time, we're talking about New England, who has won it so many times. It's so hard to pick against them. I think all the momentum is in Atlanta's favor. I'm rooting for Atlanta, but at the same time, I don't know what the line is. I'm assuming it's like New England -3. That's probably a safe bet in my opinion. I would probably take New England -3, but I'm hoping it goes the other way.
Yeah, I don't think that we see the kind of point totals we saw during the rest of the playoffs. Largely because the Super Bowl doesn't tend to lend itself to high scores unless it's just a blowout. So I think that we're more likely to see something in the low 20s. We have two really well-coached teams that are playing really well right now. My biggest thing is I want to see what Bill Belichick comes up to deal with the Falcons offense. I'm really curious to see what he comes up with, how they choose to attack that team. Because the Falcons can run the ball really well. Julio Jones is such a distraction for the defense that it's hard to cover all those other players that they have. When Julio Jones has missed games this year, Matt Ryan has still thrown a lot of touchdowns and scored an awful lot. So you can't just take Julio Jones out. That's the most exciting thing for me is to see what the Patriots do with the Falcons offense. I honestly don't care who wins this game. I have enough respect for Tom Brady and Bill Belichick that I don't root against them every time. I don't like them, but I respect the guys. I don't care about the Falcons. Like I said, one of my best friends is a huge Falcons fan. So, if they win, I'll be happy for him, but I don't really care. I want it to be a good game. That's my biggest concern.
Yeah, Glenn, me and you talked about it before we got on the show that I don't care who wins. I just want it to be a good game. If I had to root for anybody, it would be the Falcons just because, fuck the Patriots. We've seen them win too many Super Bowls. I think it should be a really good game. Key matchup for me, I think, is one that will probably get overlooked with these two great quarterbacks is the running attacks for both squads. Obviously, Atlanta has a two-headed monster, but it hasn't been overly fantastic the last couple weeks. We've seen them have bad games and Atlanta still win, but this is a decent defense, a pretty good defense that they're going to go up against. So that's something I'm going to be looking forward to. And then on the other side of the ball, can the Patriots, supplement what Tom Brady's going to do with a good running game behind it? It would be something to definitely look out for this week and heading up to it. I have a feeling that it's going to be a really good game. I think it's going to be a tight game, but if I had to pick right now, I think I'm going with the Falcons.
Did you guys hear yesterday that one of the members of the media picked up Kyle Shanahan's bag and it had the game plan in it?
Yeah, I saw that.
He couldn't find it for about 15 minutes and was, all frantic running around looking for it. And I guess I'm not familiar with who the guy was. I was listening to Mike and Mike today. They were talking about it. Apparently the guy is some older guy who's been around forever. And everybody's like, start the conspiracies now that the Patriots hired some guy to take the playbook and this and that.
Oh, yeah.
And apparently the dude's from San Fran. They're like, don't worry about it. He's from San Francisco. And they're like, wait a minute. Where's Tom Brady from? San Francisco. So.
Yeah, I did see that. I was like, yep, here we go. Always an excuse for why the Patriots win a game.
Uh-huh.
All right, we're going to head into a quick commercial break here. When we come back, we are going to bring you the all-time Titans team. So definitely something to look forward to. We'll be right back.
Time to pay the bills. Some quick ads and we'll get right back to the show.
Hey Titans fans, you've probably heard us talk about the group page several times on this show, and I'm sure you're wondering what we're talking about.
Tennessee Titans Uncensored is a Facebook group page that was built by Titans fans for Titans fans and was founded by our very own Matt Necrone.
If you're a Titans fan that's looking to talk about the latest Titan news, then this is where you need to be.
And you can help me shit talk some crackheads.
Because nobody likes crackheads.
That is Tennessee Titans Uncensored on Facebook. Tighten up. Hey guys, you've heard us talk about Hang 10 Apparel before on the show, and if you haven't checked them out, then you're truly missing out.
Hang 10 is the one place to find unique Titans gear that you will not find anywhere else.
Whether it's a Marigoda hoodie, a Mahalo at Your Boy t-shirt, or Mike Keith's Music City Miracle Call on a sweater.
There are no flags on the field! It's a miracle!
The only place to find it is Hang 10.
Just go to hangtn.com to find all this great gear.
And while you're there, don't forget to use our promo code TWOTONE to get 10% off any purchase.
That's hangtn.com, the official Titan shop of Two Tone Uncensored.
Tighten up.
You're listening to Two Tone Uncensored, brought to you by Podbean.
Hey, this is Bo Scaife. You listening to Two Tone Uncensored. Tighten up.
All right, we're back from that quick commercial. We're going to jump now into the all-time Titans list here. Just to give you a little bit of background before we jump into it, we are not taking Oilers players. If they played for both the Oilers and the Titans, they were available for this. But if they played solely for the Oilers, we didn't include them in the list. I don't know why it's Matt's decision, and he hates the history of this franchise, so take it up with him. So this is only Titans players or guys that played for both the Titans and the Oilers. We're gonna
Shots fired early.
Yeah. We're going to go through the offense first, and we'll go through the defense, just position by position, and tell you some guys that we had. So we'll start off in quarterbacks here, and I think it's a pretty easy group, guys. I'll tell you what I have in this one because I think we're all going to have pretty much the same thing, and that's McNair as your starter, Marcus would be your backup, and then Vince Young would be the third stringer. Same kind of thing, or did anybody have anything different?
I just kept it down to two. McNair and Mariota. Vince Young, I mean, his record overall was fine, but it wasn't about him winning. I would take a bunch of other guys who played for just 1 year before I would take Vince Young. So I said, you know what? I'm going to run with two quarterbacks. We'll bring up somebody from the practice squad if it comes down to that. I'd rather use those roster spots for other players.
Billy V.
Love Billy Volek. No.
It's Kerry Collins, obviously.
Right. Ryan and I had a little dispute over Vince Young the other day, and his argument was that he wasn't – well, I'll let you explain. What was your argument, Ryan? I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Right. I said that he wasn't a franchise quarterback, and it comes down to just a disagreement, really, on what the definition of franchise quarterback is.
Glenn, do you feel he was a franchise quarterback?
No.
You don't think Vince Young was a franchise?
I feel like they drafted him like a franchise quarterback, but I don't think he was a franchise quarterback. I saw the guy play all through college. He was a terrific in-the-moment player. The last 2 minutes of a game, all kinds of good fun. He wasn't a guy who could lead a team on a regular basis, or else he would have succeeded somewhere else. He had other shots in the league. No one really needed the guy. He was somebody you brought in to mimic somebody like Michael Vick. Come in here and practice and run around a whole bunch. We're not actually going to keep you on the roster for the season, though. We just want you to here for that week one game. He wasn't a guy who could hang around in the NFL because every time he threw the ball, it was like you were firing a mortar without actually stabilizing that thing first. You didn't know where the round was going.
I hate defending this guy because I'm not a Vince Young fan. However, he was a franchise quarterback. He was the face of the franchise for 3 seasons.
Which is something that we have to deal with forever.
And I understand that. And like I just said, I don't like the guy. However, he was on the cover of Madden. You don't just randomly get that without having some type of recognition.
Just because you're exciting doesn't mean you're good.
Are you a Jersey guy, Glenn?
I am a Jersey guy.
Did you have a Vince Young jersey?
I did not.
Oh, well, I'm regretfully to say that I did. But
that's why you're defending it. You invested in Vince Young, therefore you have to.
Which is probably why I don't like him. But for you can't argue that for that period of time he was the face of the franchise.
I have a mint autographed Vince Young rookie card, and it sits in a box, and I don't even think about the damn thing. I didn't even remember I had the thing until we just started having this conversation.
That's the thing, is it just comes down to a difference in what franchise quarterback is. I think it's more than just getting drafted high. I think you have to be the guy on your team for a while in order to earn that franchise quarterback.
I think you have to be the reason the team is winning.
Right.
Listen, any Vince Young supporter would say, "Oh, Vince or Jeff Fisher screwed him, this and that." Listen, I took Fisher's side well before Vince Young's side. Washed my hands once all that shit was over, and I'm glad it's over, and I don't ever want to look back. But if he wasn't such like a mental head case, taking guns and disappearing for hours at a time, he might be in a different situation. He left the Titans to go to Philly behind Mike Vick, who claimed he was on this dream team that never panned out. Like I said, I hate defending him, and I hate we're even talking about it for this long, but I did bring it up. I just thought it was crazy that for somebody like myself who doesn't like the guy personally, but admits that he was a huge part of this franchise for multiple seasons, I don't see how anyone could argue that.
He was a huge part of this franchise for multiple seasons. Anytime you miss on a quarterback, it hurts your team for years and years and years. The team was, when he took over, we had a good defense. We could get things done on offense in spite of Vince Young, or he would make plays with his legs. Jeff Fisher didn't want him. At the time, I also took Jeff Fisher's side just because I didn't like Vince Young. Part of it, Oklahoma-Texas rivalry. Let's admit it. I'm never going to cheer for a Texas player, particularly a quarterback who beat my team. That's
what about
not
Earl
happening.
Campbell?
Yeah, Earl Campbell.
Love Earl Campbell. He wasn't a Texas quarterback.
Well, I mean, obviously, but come on.
Hey, Earl Campbell came to this team, and he was the Houston Oilers for a long time, so that's fine. He won my love. It's a little bit different with Vince Young because they were winning in spite of him.
Right.
He had some great moments. He was an exciting guy to watch play. He wasn't a very good quarterback as a quarterback. As a passer of the ball, he was not the guy I wanted back there. But, he could take off and run. He was a threat every time he moved. Teams paid attention to him because you didn't know what he was going to do next. But you'd watch him throw the ball, and you didn't know where the damn thing was going, and his receivers didn't either. I couldn't put him on this list because I would never trust him to be the quarterback of my team.
That's fair.
So we'll just chalk it up to Ryan wins the argument. Matt, you're wrong. Moving on.
That was the argument, not Ryan.
Moving on.
If we were ever going to put a fucking poll up, this is what the poll question should be. Because I guarantee more people agree with me than you.
I will guarantee. Let's find out.
Facebook it.
Facebook
all right,
that
we'll
shit.
throw it up. We'll put it up when this comes out. You go on to Two-Tone Uncensored on our Facebook page. We'll have it right there on our Facebook page so you can vote on it. Was Vince Young a franchise quarterback? Moving on to halfback here, guys. A lot of good running backs to choose from in this group, but I think there's a few obviously stand up. I think Eddie George has to be the consensus number one. Then, for me, I put Chris Johnson up there ahead of DeMarco Murray for right now. And a lot of that has to do with that 2,000-yard season. It was 3 years he'd rushed for more yards than any running back in any era in a 3-year stint. So right now he has to be the second in my eyes. But I think Murray can take that spot eventually.
I've got the same ratings. Look, I love Eddie George. I love Chris Johnson. I've got Chris Johnson's signed helmet. I've got a bunch of his jersey cards and shit like that. I love Chris Johnson. I had a sticker of him on my laptop when I worked at Gateway at one point.
Yeah.
Fuck you. Chris Johnson was a bad man. He was exciting because every time he touched the ball, you didn't know what was going to happen. Was he going to get tackled for 3 yards, or was he going to score a touchdown from 70 yards out? He was so exciting, and he was a guy that no one really saw coming. And we drafted him, and people were like, what the hell? And you looked at his tape, like, my God, that guy's fast. You looked at his combine time. He's unbelievably fast. I think part of the problem I had with Chris Johnson toward the end of his time with us is our line was declining, and people didn't want to admit that, but they were declining. And he decided to pout about it instead of playing through it, or like DeMarco Murray, calling them out and making them play better. Chris Johnson wasn't a leader. He was a me-first guy. Jeff Fisher was responsible for the 2,000-yard season because he ran Chris Johnson in spite of winning. He didn't care. Chris Johnson was getting 2,000 yards. There was going to be something to hang our hat on that year. DeMarco Murray, if he could manage to play at this level for 2 or 3 more seasons, maybe he moves up past Chris Johnson. But Chris Johnson was a Titan first and last to me. He's done okay in Arizona, but he's a Titan. Eddie George is a Titan. DeMarco Murray was a Cowboy. As a Sooner, he's always going to have a place on the roster with me. He was a Cowboy first. They screwed up by letting him walk away. The Eagles didn't use him right. We lucked out and got him. He's not a Titan creation, whereas the other guys are. So I put him third.
Yeah, my list is identical. Eddie George, to me, is basically what Earl Campbell is to Glenn. I think Ohio State's got to be my most hated college team, but Eddie George won me over. He's by far my favorite running back. Chris Johnson was explosive. Obviously, he's number 2. I think that even with, let's just say we keep DeMarco for another 3-4 years, and he may not be as productive as he was this season, I don't see him overpassing Chris Johnson. I think Chris Johnson's pretty solid at that number 2 spot. But, like Glenn just said, we acquired Murray in a great acquisition. So hard to get a better deal than what we got for him. I don't think that he'll have a 3 years of what we just saw. I'm hoping next year he comes out strong out of the gate. But I think the next following year, I think, is when we're really going to see a lot of Derrick Henry.
Yeah, I think he's kind of holding the spot for Derrick Henry at this point.
Which is fine. And, as long as everything comes along properly and if DeMarco can put up, what – bad example, but what Lendell was to Chris Johnson at one point, you know what I mean? Like,
he's a much better player than Lendell.
Well, yeah.
Fat? No, is that what you were going for? He'd be fat?
Donut eat motherfucker.
Yeah, that's another one. But no, I do think Chris Johnson's solid at that number 2 spot. But Murray, I think, will have another great year more than likely. But I think the following year is when we really start to see the decline.
Yeah, we had this conversation in 3 or 4 years, and Henry might move up there over Chris Johnson, depending on what he turns into. But right now, his best shot is to replace DeMarco Murray on our list.
Yep.
And just to throw it out there, I also hate Ohio State, but Eddie George is my favorite NFL player of all time. I loved him when he was here. I absolutely loved watching him run. Big physical guy, which you don't get to see too much of, and I'm glad that we kind of went back to that because now we get to watch 2 big physical guys run the football. It reminds me of growing up watching Eddie George, who still this day is my favorite player. I have probably 10 Titans jerseys, and I think 4 of them are Eddie George jerseys, so definitely my favorite player. But let's move on to fullback here, guys. I think this one at the top spot's another one where it's real easy to pick the top guy, being Lorenzo Neal. Would you guys agree with that?
No, I don't think anybody can complain. Lorenzo Neal was a great blocker. He was a great personality, and he was part of the home run throwback. His place is cemented in history.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely number 1 for sure. The only other fullback when you're talking about all-time greats, Lorenzo Neal is the only one, but one of my personal favorites was Ahmad Hall after him. I do remember guys like Robert Holcomb who, had his share of decent seasons, but those 2 are definitely the only ones that I would put on any kind of list.
Yeah, they're the guys that are on my list. I got Neal and Hall. Those are the 2 guys I picked out.
Same here for that one. Moving on to wide receivers, this is where it gets a little bit more interesting, guys. Because of the guys that we've had, haven't had a ton of talent at wide receiver, but some guys with a little bit less talent stepping up in certain spots. I'll just throw my list out there, and you guys can throw yours. We'll talk about it here. But for me, my 5 guys at wide receiver in this order: I had Derek Mason, Drew Bennett, Nate Washington, Chris Sanders, and then Kendall Wright. And I know KW probably not on everybody's list there, but just stats-wise is why I made it to mine. But who did you guys have, and who would you disagree with?
I have Mason, Bennett. I have Kendall Wright, and I put Kevin Dyson on there more because he was a big part of one miraculous season in play for us than anything else. really, when I was doing this group, I was just kind of stunned at how bad our wide receivers have been since we moved to Tennessee. Since the run and shoot, I don't think we've had one guy that I would call a number one receiver on any other roster. You know, as much as I like Derek Mason, and he is definitely the class of this group, he's not a great receiver. He was a good receiver. He was a good receiver when he went to the Ravens, but he's not a great receiver. We haven't had a really stellar wide receiver since then. You did mention Sanders. My fondness for Sanders comes from playing Madden. I'm going to go ahead and tell my story here real quick. There was a time whenever I was playing Madden, and Chris Sanders was on the team. And I would switch him to running back and use him as a running back, and he was the CJ2K of that, like Madden 95 or 96, whatever it was.
Madden 82.
But, I switched him to running back, and I would just destroy people with Chris Sanders. And I actually made a grown man cry playing Madden using Chris Sanders. So he's always had a special place in my heart, even though he wasn't that good of a receiver. He was a better return man, I think, than a receiver. But because I could turn him into a running back on Madden and made a grown man cry in front of the girl that he liked and a bunch of his friends, and they weren't my people, he's always got a spot in my heart.
So if he was a grown man then, he's probably dead by now, right?
Yes, because I am that old.
Nah, his son's actually pretty decent. He's a receiver at Notre Dame right now. Anyway, no, to your point, man, we have had some lackluster receivers. My list goes like this: Derek Mason, Drew Bennett, Kevin Dyson, Nate Washington, and Chris Sanders. To add, I mean, like you just said, no true number one guys. Derek Mason, to your point, we probably had him in his prime when he left Tennessee. He was the number 2 in Baltimore. So, you can't. That right there is my list, but you got guys that some fans would be like, oh, what about Randy Moss? I don't ever want to mention Randy Moss as a Titan ever again. That season was a disaster. During when I think back of Titan receivers, I can go back and think of some guys. I wouldn't call them all-time greats by any means, but Justin McCarron's had a good few years. He was one of my favorites back then. We have Justin Gage had a good year or two. I mean, but all these guys,
one great catch.
That's what I mean. Like all these guys are at best B receivers.
They're all role player type guys.
It didn't matter who we took in the draft, whether it was Calico, Brandon Jones, Courtney Roby. None of these guys panned out. I mean, we had Roby as a returner for a little while, and he was decent at that. But that's why I'm so. While we have this number 5 pick, if we can get a Mike Williams, that's why I'm all about it.
I completely agree. And this is actually, I only put 4 receivers on here because I would rather run a 2 tight end set all day long with the running backs that we have and the tight ends that we're about to talk about.
Yeah.
And just these receivers could just be out there making plays every now and then because that's who these guys are. I couldn't make my list 5 guys. I know you guys did, but I left it at 4.
Well, in my head, we were trying to come up with a 53-man roster. I had a solid 49 or 50, and I kind of just added a few guys to throw them in there. But
which tells you a lot about the talent we've had over the last few years.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I was surprised that you guys didn't throw Calico on the list there. Just such a awesome player in his time here. That's what someone sent in one question this week. I thought we'd talk about it, and it's a great point talking about Calico, bringing it up. And I wanted to ask you guys here, who do you think is the worst draft pick the Titans have ever had? Because I think Calico would probably be my choice for worst ever.
Jake Locker has to be the biggest swing and miss, but between Calico, Woolfolk, and DGB, I mean, those are all 3 were second-round picks. Or actually, Woolfolk was first-round pick, I believe.
He was a first-round pick, yeah.
Like 26 or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, they're all big misses, but Jake Locker to not even make it outside his rookie deal and I admit that our O-line got him killed, but how do you draft a guy with the 8th overall pick that doesn't have the heart to he literally could be playing right now as a backup in the league. Like that's not far-fetched, but he didn't even have the desire to go past his 4th year. That's poor general managing Rustin Webster.
Yeah, and I agree with what you're saying there, but it's because Rustin Webster picked him that I don't hold that against him. Because you could look at his college career, and you could look at what the team that we had was, and you could see why he failed. Tyrone Calico was high on my list for this question. He had all the measurables. He was definitely a Rustin Webster type of guy. He everything about that guy screamed great player. Absolute bum in the NFL. DGB, he's a second round guy. He was actually my number 2 on this group because like I discussed in the offseason, I really thought DGB could be a great guy, a great player. And maybe he still is sometime. He's got all the physical ability. He's another Tyrone Calico guy, but he's also another Titans receiver kind of guy. If you're a receiver and we draft you, best of luck to you, man. Andre Wolfolk was the guy that I was the most excited about that turned into absolutely nothing. Guy could not play football at all in the NFL. And, an Oklahoma guy, I thought he really had a good chance to be successful in the NFL. I thought he was coming to the right team, and he had nothing for us. So he was my number 1 guy because he was a first-round draft pick that I thought was going to be really good.
One name that I was surprised left off the list is Pac-Man Jones. Even though he wasn't a bust in the NFL, was a bust of a pick for us, 6th overall, and we had him for effectively really 1 season. And that would hurt a lot. Obviously, being a West Virginia fan, that's still the pick I think that pains me the most, probably in the history of the NFL draft. Going from my favorite college team to my favorite pro team, and then can't keep himself from beating up strippers. Definitely a sad story for me, and for the Tennessee Titans. A huge waste of a pick at 6th overall.
He would be higher on my list if he weren't such a talented guy and didn't have a decent career after leaving us. Absolute idiot. Can't stand the guy as a person, but he can play football. Whereas these other guys that we're talking about, either they chose not to play football or else they just physically weren't capable of doing it or mentally capable of doing it, probably more likely. So those guys were higher on my list.
Yeah, there was a time, this was obviously back when this was going on, but I don't remember the reason why. We didn't have a first-round pick in 2004. We took Jones in 5. So fast forward a little bit to when we drafted Chris Johnson in 2008 when nobody really knew who he was, at least I didn't. You look back, you had Adam Jones in the first round, Vince Young after that, Michael Griffin, who hadn't panned out yet. So in my mind, another horrible draft class, or draft selection rather. Going into 2008 when we took Chris Johnson with all this controversy, nobody really knew anything about him other than he had a fast 40 time. It seemed like every year we're making these horrible first-round picks, and following Chris Johnson was Kenny Britt, which doesn't help the cause. But during that time, man, it was like a string of bad picks. It was, and the year before 2004 was Woolfolk. So I mean, I don't know. It just felt like for years we had just like no luck in the draft whatsoever.
I totally agree with that. It was a long decade of sadness right there.
But let's move on here, guys, to the tight end slot. This one, obviously have some guys here that really stood out. We've always been a team that seems to always have a pretty good tight end. I think it comes down to 2 big names here, in Frank Wycheck and Delanie Walker at the top. For me, I put Walker at the top because of Walker has done in single season stuff that Wycheck never has done. I think talent-wise, when you talk about the whole package, Walker is the better player. He's had 1,000-yard seasons. He's had 8 touchdown seasons and such, stuff that, Wycheck hasn't done. So for me, it goes Walker and then Wycheck. And then after, a friend of the show, Bo Scaife, makes the list, a guy that I was very fond of in his time there. I used to have a big poster of Bo Scaife on my wall. And another Texas guy that I know that Glenn secretly hates, but I always loved Bo Scaife. But that's my list. How's your guys shake out?
Yeah, I had Frank Wycheck first because I think he played at a time where we didn't ask that much of our tight ends. He came on the heels of the run and shoot. We weren't really a tight end orientated team. It was a lot more about Eddie George, block for Eddie, keep McNair clean, be his outlet. So I don't think Frank had the opportunities that Delanie has seen. I think he could have done it because he did everything. He was a do-it-all guy in that backfield. He played H-back more than he played tight end. I don't think he had the opportunity to put up stats that Delanie has. And Delanie is a much more explosive guy. He's faster. I like his personality a lot. Delanie is not my number 2, but it's more like 1A, 1B. And, Frank is my number one, then Delaney. Then I got Bo Scaife. I've said it before. Mike Keith shouting Bo Scaife's name, that Bo Scaife, as he catches touchdowns. I love that. I went ahead and put a fourth tight end on here instead of a fifth wide receiver. I put Craig Stevens on there because he was such a tremendous blocker for such a long time. And he was a much better pass catcher than we ever asked him to be because we were, again, such run-oriented teams during most of his time. And when we did start throwing the ball, we brought in Delaney Walker. So Craig, again, didn't get a chance to show up and shine. But I went with a 4 tight end, 4 wide receiver, 3 running back group because historically we look like a pound the ball, use a double tight end, balance out the defense so that we can get our matchups kind of a team. And I think we could be again this next year. If we bring in a good tight end in this draft, if we don't get Mike Williams, we could very well end up running a good 2 tight end set, balancing out the defense and creating a lot more room for our running backs and our other receivers to work.
Yeah, you're not wrong. My list, obviously.
I know.
Wycheck, definitely the number one guy. I will say this, however, with Delaney being my 2 and Bo Scaife my 3, Delaney Walker, if we didn't get him so late in his career, he easily could outplay or maybe jump a spot on Frank Wycheck's as the number 1 tight end. I think that even though he's – how old is he, 33, 4?
32, I thought.
32? Okay, yeah, you're probably right. I don't know. I just knew he was up there. But playing in San Francisco for all them years behind Vernon Davis, I mean, he really doesn't have that much wear and tear on his body. We got him late, and I still think he has a good couple years left in him.
I do too.
If we would have got him 2-3 years prior to when we did, and he played, he went to a team that he got an opportunity. He appreciates the Titans for that, and he plays every game 110%. So if we had more time with Delaney, I could see him easily overcoming Frank Wycheck for that number 1 spot, but because we got him late in his career, I don't know that he will. But Delaney is easily one of my favorite Titans now and probably for a long time.
I was going to say the same thing. He's definitely one of my favorite Titans ever. Personality, leadership, how hard he plays, everything about the guy is right. And like you said, we got him late in his career because he wasted a bunch of time in San Francisco. I really do wish we would have got him earlier.
Yeah, I agree with that. He's just to clear it up. He's 32. He'll be 33 before the season starts. And I really wish I did what you did there, Glenn, with the 4 wide receivers, 4 tight ends, because I really wanted to put Craig Stevens on this list. I just couldn't put him over Bo Scaife.
Yeah, right.
But I really thought that he needed to be on the list. And it's a guy that's always been. He doesn't put up the big stats, but he's out there. Hitting guys, great blocker, just a fantastic blocker year in and year out. And, that's not a sexy stat. That's not what gets you noticed.
Well, while we're on the topic of tight end, and we just got off the topic of bust draft picks, I believe he was a second, maybe even a third-round pick, but Ben Troop I had a lot of high hopes for, who let me down.
Yep, Ben Troop for sure. I'm thinking of a certain player with the Packers. Yeah, there's been a couple disappointments.
Jared Cook, yes. Mm-hmm. We don't talk about him.
We don't talk about him because he had all the ability in the world and couldn't get his head on straight. But yeah.
And Jake Locker. And
Yeah. I mean, there's a few reasons why he didn't succeed here. But yeah, there are some other guys you could easily put on this list. It was much easier for me to come up with 4 really good tight ends than it was with 4 decent receivers.
If I recall, I believe he was a third-round pick, and we traded up with the Patriots to get him.
Sounds about right.
Yeah.
But let's move on of tackles. This is also a list, one of the ones we talked about a few times now. We've talked about how hard it was to pick guys because of how the lack of talent and stuff. But this was a list that kind of got hard because there's a lot of guys that deserve recognition. We've had the luck of having some really good really good tackles over the years that we've been the Tennessee Titans. For me, my list is Hopkins, Roos, Miller, and Stewart in that order. How's your guys' look?
A little bit different. I went with Hopkins is an easy first guy. Michael Roos was a good tackle for us for a long time. I went ahead and threw a Taylor Lewan in there. I think that he's already proven, as one of the best tackles in the league, he's already worked his way up. I think he's a better left tackle than a lot of our right tackles were. You notice I'm naming mostly left tackles here because those are the guys that stand out. I did put a right tackle in here. It's John Runyon. I love the way John Runyon played the game. I realize he didn't spend most of his career with us, but I love the way he went out there and just knocked the crap out of people. He was in people's face the whole time. He's ripe for Jack Conklin to pass him up in the next couple of years. For me, for an offensive lineman, you had to have at least played 3 years. For my tackles, you had to give me 3 years. I think that in a few years, Jack Conklin probably passes him because he's better as a pass blocker too. But right now, I put Runyon out there because he was a tone setter on the right side of that line.
My list is real similar to yours, a little bit different. Obviously, Brad Hopkins, my number 1. Michael Roos, who played, I believe, 10 years with us, and solid player, number 2. Taylor Lewan is my number 3. Fred Miller, 4. And one guy none of you mentioned, David Stewart, who played the right side, who was pretty much as solid as Michael Roos was and played together for a long time. A big country.
Actually, Ryan listed him. Ryan had Stewart.
Oh, well, Ryan used my template, so that makes sense.
Oh, exactly. But, I really liked Stewart, but Stewart was a really solid right tackle for a long time. He wasn't just a huge difference maker to me, but towards the end of his time with us, he was just a penalty machine. And it was the same problem I had with Fred Miller. Just too many penalties for me. At least when Runyon was making penalties, it's because he was tearing guys' eyeballs out.
Runyon's a dirtball, man. No, okay.
The dude was dirty as hell. He was everything everybody hated about that team for a long time.
When I think of John Runyon, I think of him as an Eagle.
I understand, and that's what I said. Conklin will pass him in a couple years here.
See, there's a reason I didn't. You guys, I believe, both had Lewan. I just couldn't put him on there yet, just because it hasn't been long enough yet for me, and it's. His years he's been here, he's been either, pretty good, a little bit better than decent, or, of course, last year when he was just absolutely stunning, just fantastic. I think in a year, maybe even 1 year, but probably 2 years, he makes this list for me. In 3-4 years, I think him and Conklin could be very close to the top of this list, and I hope they are because – if they can continue to play the way they played last season, I think that those guys could end up 1 and 2 if they keep that kind of play up.
Yeah, and I'll just say this. We're about to go over the whole offensive line, but tackle, along with O-line as a whole, has got to be our strongest suit as a franchise whole. I mean, we've had some – I don't know if it's because the rest of our team hasn't been up to par, but in my opinion, our O-line has been our strong suit for years.
It was a point of pride for a long time, and then during the Chris Johnson days it started declining, and it had been such a strong suit for so long that it was one of the things leading up to before they finally got around to firing Rustin Webster that I used to argue with people a lot about was that we hadn't spent enough draft picks on offensive linemen. We were taking guys in the 5th or 6th round and asking them to develop into first-round players a year later. We let our offensive line get old. We had guys who are on this list, Brad Hopkins, Michael Roos. We let these guys get old, and then we didn't bring in adequate replacements for them. If you're going to draft somebody in the 4th or 5th round and expect him to eventually grow into a starter, he needs to play behind that great player for 3 or 4 years. He can't be your starter, year 2. And that was the mistake that the Titans made under Rustin Webster. Is they didn't develop the offensive line. They stopped respecting how incredibly important it is to have a good offensive line. And so we had that one dip, but otherwise the offensive line through the 90s, through the early 2000s, it was the offensive line was phenomenal the whole time through pretty much. There was a reason Warren Moon was so good. There's a reason Steve McNair was so good. They had really good offensive lines. Jake Locker, for as much as he had his flaws, he never had a chance behind that offensive line. It's good to see us moving back in the right direction with our offensive line again.
I absolutely agree with that. It is something that, it's definitely something I paid attention to, not getting guys under. When we had fantastic tackles, you just couldn't get anybody under them to learn when we had the opportunity to. It's something that I found very frustrating at the time. But now we got 2 guys in there with long careers ahead of them, that are fantastic. And I hope to see them higher on this list as their careers go on. But for me, I just couldn't put them there yet. just because it was a little too early for me. But moving on, and another very talented group. Let's head to the guards here, and I think it's obvious. Out of all of the ones that we've said so far, an obvious number one, I think this is the most obvious number one, is Bruce Matthews. Probably the best player to ever play for our franchise, all the way back to the Oilers days. You can make the argument that Bruce Matthews is the best Titan or Oiler of all time. A fantastic football player, tied for the record for most Pro Bowls in a career. For me, behind that, Benji Olsen, Zach Pillar, and then Jacob Bell. How did your guys' list go?
I actually kept it down to just three. I did Matthews, Benji, and Zach, just like you did there. Bruce, obviously. I almost put Mike Munchak on this list anyway. Even though he wasn't a Titan, I almost put him on there anyway, just because he was a coach and he had been such an incredible player for us for so long.
I almost did the same thing just to do it, because Munchak deserves to be mentioned every time you talk about the guards.
This is what I'm talking about with the tradition of incredible offensive linemen. We've had a couple of the very best in league history play for this team, and I've gotten the chance to appreciate them, when I was old enough to actually enjoy them playing. But Benji and Zach, I think, are two underrated guys. They also kind of spoke to me that after Matthews, the Titans haven't had just fantastic guards. Benji and Zach were both really good guards, but they were playing with really great tackles around them. But they were both really good, big road grader type guys, great run blockers, not as good pass blockers. But I really enjoyed having them on the team just because they were part of such great offensive lines that I wouldn't put them on there. I left off Bell. Bell was a good guy. He played for us for quite a while. I couldn't put him as part of my starting group.
He's very Eugene Amano-liked, in my opinion, Jacob Bell.
Yeah.
But I won't go too deep into this, but my list was the same. I got Matthews, Olsen, Pillar, and then it's kind of a Randy Moss-ish kind of pick, but I did put Steve Hutchinson in there just because of overall what a great player he's been his whole career and what a big impact he was when he came to us. I mean, we weren't really doing much with the team as a whole, but he was a big lift, and I put him on there.
Yeah, he was a big signing for us. He didn't play at a high enough level long enough for us for him to make my list. But he was kind of like the Reggie White going to Green Bay thing. When Green Bay's really got nothing going on, and Reggie White goes, like, what the hell? Steve Hutchinson coming to the Titans was like, why is he going there? It was a great signing for us, and I get what you're saying, but he didn't make my list.
And before we get off topic, Mike Munchak was just canned by Pittsburgh.
I'm
happy about it.
Bring him back. I want to let him come back here, and he and Russ Grimm can hook up and turn this into one hell of an offensive line instead of just a really good offensive line.
There you go. I left Hutchinson off my list as well for the exact same reason. He just fantastic player. He just wasn't here long enough for really for him to make my list, for him to be considered, fantastic.
Yeah,
player.
He was a Seahawk to me, not a Titan.
Right,
yeah,
exactly.
Obviously.
All right, guys, we're moving on to center here. For this one, I only had one guy, but I have an honorable mention for it.
All right. No, Kevin Mawai is my only center. I know where you're going with the honorable mention. The only other one that I could even think about putting on is Justin Hartwig,
who I did put on.
I kept it simple with one center. Kevin Mawai is almost like the same boat as Hutchinson was, but Mawai was here a little bit longer, and he played a huge part at center. I mean, that guy was a monster.
Yeah, and he changed the tone of the team, and he also did the big deal by coming here, like Matt just said. He's on my list. I put Hartwig first because Hartwig was more of a Titan before he left and went on to other teams and committing terrible penalties in the Super Bowl. But he also came on the show, so he gets an honorable mention regardless. If you came on the show, you're on the list. But it kind of surprised me when I got to center that we didn't have any standout centers. We've had a whole lot of different guys play center for this team. It's like everybody played for 2 or 3 seasons and then was gone. At whatever level they played, none of them were here very long. They all just kind of rotated through.
We usually keep a swing guard as our center. All right, Ryan, slacking. Let's move on. Yeah,
Eugene Amano was the guy I put in there as an honorable mention. He's a guy that played for a while as a Titan and wasn't spectacular by no means, but he was a guy that was a pretty solid football player, and I thought that he deserved to be on the list just for the years that he put in with the Titans.
Eugene was a serviceable center.
Absolutely. We're going to move on to the defense here, though. Starting off at defensive end. This is one of the groups on this list that actually has a lot of talent on it. Obviously, for me, it starts off with, the freak, Javon Curse. Then you have KVB, Derek Morgan, and Kevin Carter. A lot of talent when those four names, those four guys right there.
Yeah, I had Javon, Casey, KVB, Kevin Carter. It's a pretty easy group to throw out there. I know that Morgan's going to show up here, but he's a linebacker to me. At least that's what he is now. But, Javon Curse, he's the freak. Even though he didn't play his whole career here, he set the Titans on fire. Everybody knew who we were because Javon Curse was such a fantastic tight end off the end. I can close my eyes right now and see him pedaling that bicycle on the sidelines trying to stay loose. Jarrell Casey right now has been one of the most underrated defensive players, defensive lineman in the league for years. He's finally in the Pro Bowl again. I almost put him down as a defensive tackle. I kept going back and forth because I think naturally he's a defensive tackle, but we're in the 3-4, so he can be a defensive end. It gives me more room to put more guys on the list.
Yeah, I have a lot of trouble admitting that we're a 3-4. I'm still a 4-3 guy at heart, but my DNs go Curse, KVB, Kevin Carter, and I did put Derek Morgan at D end. And he hasn't really been that much of a standout D end or a standout linebacker, but he's been above average, and he closes out the list. But I definitely did move into D tackle, had Jarrell Casey, because in my mind, man, I mean, I know we play him at end right now, but that guy's a D tackle. You can't tell me anything different.
Yeah, naturally he's a 4-3 defensive tackle, just like Morgan is a 4-3 defensive end. But right. I think Morgan is a better outside linebacker than he was a tackle as an end, because as an end he was disappointing. As an outside linebacker, he's been pretty productive, and him and Arakpo together have been a really good team. So it's easier for me to put him on this list if I move him to outside linebacker.
I think that goes along with progression as well, though. I mean,
as he gets better in years, but I think it's a better fit for him.
I agree. But D tackle, got to start out with Albert Haynesworth.
Absolutely.
That guy was insane for many years, and
not just as a player, as a person as well. But
yeah, I remember the face stomp. That wasn't one of his better moments, but he's definitely my number one D tackle for sure. Number 2, Jarrell Casey. Number 3, John Thornton, and number 4, downtown Tony Brown.
I went with Haynesworth first. I think, again, in the 4-3 thinking, Carl Klug next to Jarrell Casey would be an incredible defensive tackle. Those two guys together would wreak so much havoc if we were still playing a 4-3. So I've actually put him on this list over a guy that I really respected, Henry Ford. Ford was a really good guy that not everybody thought about, but he was a Carl Klug kind of guy where he was always involved. He was always making plays, but you didn't think about him too much because it wasn't about our defensive line at that point. And then I also have John Thornton on here. I'm less impressed with John Thornton than I am with Henry Ford. The defensive tackle group to me isn't as strong if you're doing a 3-4. As a 4-3 group, you pair them with those defensive ends. That's just an insane defensive line.
I went Jarrell Casey at first here, and I really compared him and Albert Haynesworth. It is very close. If you look at their numbers, their stats are pretty close. I went with Casey, gave him a slight edge just because of some of the stats favored Casey or Haynesworth. It was tough though. I think they're definitely really close right now, and the fact that Casey obviously has more years in front of him as a Titan is definitely going to help him push him over the list. So Haynesworth second for me. Then I have Tony Brown, and then Jason Fisk. Henry Ford and John Thornton are both honorable mentions on my list. It was hard to pick that group of Fisk, Thornton, and Ford. Was really hard to pick between the three of them because they all have had similar careers, all good football players, and I love John Thornton, the WVU guy, a Mountaineer and a Titan, but I had to go with Jason Fisk because his stats give him the edge there. But really another group that has a lot of talent in it.
Yeah, and Fisk was on my list. He was the next guy up. Him, Ford, and Thornton are roughly the same guy as far as I'm concerned. They're all really decent tackles, but they weren't huge difference makers to me. For me, disruptive guys go up higher in the list. If I were listing Casey as a defensive tackle, I think I would put him above Hainsworth too. But Hainsworth was such a force in the middle of that field, or in the middle of the line, just crushing people backwards. Whereas Casey's more of an agile, more technical tackle than Hainsworth. Hainsworth was just a force in there, and he played with such rage. I really enjoyed him. But of that group, the reason I put Carl Klug in there is not just because we're obviously a huge fan of Carl Klug on the show, and we want him on, but because I think he's such a disruptive guy that you could put him on there running a 4-3 where he doesn't have to take on a center, just directly on, and he's the other defensive tackle. I think he would give us the production above the rest of that list.
Yeah, I would agree with a lot with what you said there. I mean, it was tough, between Fisk, Thornton, and Ford. You said it; they are about all the same guy. That was a tough group to pick out of, and my bias wanted to go with Thornton, but I had to be honest, and that's why I went with Fisk.
Nothing wrong with that.
But a very talented group there, and good company to be named with, and Casey and Hainsworth and Brown. I think a guy that gets forgotten, but was a hell of a football player. But let's move on to linebackers here, guys. I went with a group of, what is this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 guys here. And I know we'll probably, because of how big of a linebacker group you have to go with, probably going to have a lot of differences. But I think we all have probably the same number 1 and 2 between Keith Bullock and Randall Godfrey, both outstanding guys. For me, Bullock, then Godfrey, then Eddie Robinson, followed by Stephen Tulloch, followed by Brian Arakpo, and then Baron Wortham is going to end my list. How did you guys have it?
Yeah, in my mind, we're still running a 4-3 as I went to linebacker, so I didn't need as big of a group. But I have Keith Bullock, Randall Godfrey. I think those two guys, by the time Bullock left and went to the Giants, he was already spent. We got the best out of that guy. I really enjoyed Bull a lot, and Godfrey was underrated when he was with us. I put Stephen Tulloch on there because he had so much ability, but we just weren't getting the attention whenever he was playing for us. And then I put Arakpo and Morgan based on what they're doing now. I couldn't put Robinson on there. He had some great moments, but I never felt like Robinson was a productive career guy with us or anything like that, so I couldn't throw him on that list.
My list, similar. Keith Bullock, Randall Godfrey, Stephen Tulloch. I'm going to actually swap them as I'm looking at them now. Brian Arakpo would probably be up next. But the last two guys that neither of you had mentioned, Peter Sermon, who was pretty solid for us for a few years out of Oregon, and one guy that I thought was going to be our middle linebacker for a long time who ended up retiring due to injury, Colin McCarthy, who's out of Miami University. And that guy played with a lot of heart. I really enjoyed watching him, and he was a breath of fresh air when we really needed it. And, unfortunately injury caught up to him and he had to retire early, but I really thought that was going to be our guy for a few years.
I did too, and we were hurt so much at linebacker at the time. Anybody could have come in here and been the savior because we had been through the Rockies, the Boyman, the Calmus, the Sermon, who had one really good year and then just couldn't ever put it together after that. And the same thing with McCarthy. He couldn't stay healthy to be that guy. Sermon and McCarthy both missed the list for me because they couldn't keep it together long enough to be a guy for us. Career with the Titans wasn't there.
I'd agree with that. This was a tough list for me to make. There's some guys. I like Eddie Robinson. He had the stats, he had the longevity. If I had Morgan as a defensive end because he plays more of a defensive end role, but if I had him listed as a linebacker, I think he would have kicked Wortham off the list, and it would have been him there. Tulloch's a guy I always liked, and you put it very well. He was a guy that was really good when no one was paying attention to the Titans. But it was a tough list to make. I considered, Sermon was definitely a guy that I was looking at, and he'd probably be the first one off of my list. That for next runner up. But it was definitely a tough list to make towards the bottom. But he barely missed the cut in my eyes.
One guy I'll give honorable mention to, I do think of him sort of as a Colt more than a Titan, but David Thornton had a lot of good years with us too.
He really did, but like you said, he's a Colt.
Yeah. Anyway, moving to quarterbacks, I'll start out mine. Obviously, number one, Samari Roll, hands down, no questions asked. Number two for me, Cortland Finnegan. 3, Jason McCourty. 4, Andre Dyson, and 5, ATV, Alteron Werner.
Yeah, I only differed right at the end. I didn't put Dyson over Alteron. It was just I don't feel like he was as good as the team around him made him look. No offense to him. This was a group that really didn't impress me much. The fact that this is our group of corners, it kind of leads me, if we're looking at an all-time team, the secondary would again be the weakness.
Yeah.
Our corners are like our receivers. Why do we struggle so much at those two positions? Why can't we get good corners in like we used to have back in the good old days as the Oilers? Why can't we get good receivers in like we had back in the good old days? I don't get why we can't draft these guys or develop these guys and then keep them around. ATV, I thought he was a really talented guy, but he never had the physical gifts, and eventually that was going to catch up with him. I think it did catch up with him in Tampa Bay. McCourty has been a really solid guy his career with us. He's getting towards the end of it, but he's never blown me away. Finnegan is higher than McCourty for me, not because of ability as much as attitude. I love the way he got in people's head. The fact that he made Andre Johnson kick his ass. He's the only guy who ever broke Andre Johnson's cool. That's impressive to me. I put him on that list. And Samori Roll was the best of the group for a while. He played.
Yeah, to your point, Glenn, you look at this list, I'm pretty sure we all have the same top 3. McCourty and Cortland Finnegan, I believe they're both 7th-round picks, weren't they?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean,
it's him and Ferner, I thought. McCourty was higher than that.
Well, McCourty was either
third,
6th or 7th. No. I'm positive. I'll look it up right now.
Look it up right now, because I thought McCourty was drafted higher than, and it was ATV who was the other. We can't believe we found this guy at the end of the draft.
No, ATV was a 4th-round pick.
Was he? Okay.
And
that's right. Yeah, I was arguing with somebody about our cornerbacks, a couple of years back.
The thing with Jason McCourty is Devin went a year earlier, even though they both played at Rutgers. Devin went in the 1st round.
You are slow with the internet.
Yeah, my bad. 6th round.
Yeah,
okay.
6th.
So I thought he was a 7th, but yeah, I know Finnegan was
awful damn late. A lot of these guys, when your best players are 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th round guys, then obviously you haven't given the position the attention that it deserves.
Just to throw out there my list real quick, a little bit different. I went with 5 guys here: Roll, and then Finnegan for me, then Darrell Lewis, Andre Dyson, and then McCourty for me. A lot of it, what put Dyson over McCourty was, statistics. And I agree with you, Glenn. He had a lot more to work with back there than McCourty has, or that had and currently has. But still, his stats were just a little bit better. They were close to my eyes. Lewis is a guy, he had like 6 seasons in a row where he had at least 4 interceptions. He wasn't a guy that was fundamentally great, but he just had a knack for getting the ball, which is something awesome to have if you can have a guy do it regularly. And he had like 3 seasons in a row as a Titan where he had over 5 interceptions in 3 straight seasons. So, a guy that kind of gets forgotten of, but he was a interception machine for a while in his career.
My problem with him is that either he picked the ball off or he got burned.
Yeah, that kind of did happen a lot with Lewis.
So that's why I left him off the list, because I respected that you went and grabbed an Oiler who became a Tennessee Oiler at least. I respect that you threw him on my list here, but at the same time, he pissed me off an awful lot in his career with us. There were a lot of that was a great interception, and what the hell was he looking at as the guy's ripping down the field for a touchdown? It was either or too much for me.
All right, guys, let's head into safety here. First guy I think we'll all have similar here at the top of the list, actually, the first 2 guys. Blaine Bishop is my number 1, followed by Michael Griffin, followed by Marcus Robinson and Chris Hope. How did your guys' list end up?
Mine are a little different. I went with Marcus, then Blaine, then Michael, and then Chris Hope. Same guys, slightly different order. Marcus, I think, was underrated for all the good that he did for this team. And he and Blaine together were just tremendous. I think you could switch Blaine and Marcus either way. I felt like Marcus was a better safety than Michael Griffin. Griffin had some really good years, but it never he was either Griffin was suffering from our lack of cornerbacks, which I think is the case largely for him, or else he was never fully in control of the defense. It always seemed like he was out of position a couple times a game, or just wasn't quite where he needed to be to me. But again, if you're covering for the fact that you have no corners, maybe your safety gets a little bit of leeway for the fact that he's busy, making up for mistakes everybody else is making on the field.
Where's the love for Lance Schulters?
Fuck Lance Schulters.
Whoa. I got my list is before you go ahead. Blaine Bishop, Lance Shoulders, Michael Griffin, Chris Hope. Go ahead. Fuck Lance Shoulders. What?
No, I said I have nothing against Lance Shoulders.
When I think of safety back in the good old days, that's the guy that first comes to mind. Michael Griffin obviously has been with us a long time, so you got to throw him on there one way or the other. And Chris Hope is another guy that stood out to me. We haven't had a whole lot of talent at safety. Some guys that come to mind like Donnie Nicky, Lamont Thompson, Babineau. We've had a lot of guys that came and gone, but I think those four guys stood out to me the most. And obviously Blaine Bishop has to be number one.
My thing with Lance is he was a 49er.
Yeah.
Then he was with us for a little while. Then he did Atlanta, Miami. We got him at the end of his peak. We got 2 good years out of him. His last year, we got kind of what was left of him, and then he went to Miami, and he wasn't a Titan in my mind so much.
That was like the same reason that left him off my list. He's a guy that's had a great career, but most of it was elsewhere, and he did have 2 good seasons with us, but that wasn't enough to push him over some of these guys that had 4, 5, 6 good years with us. All right, guys, let's head into the special teams here. First one up's kicker, and I know a lot of people would probably have Rob here. I just went with a different one. I knew you guys would have Rob, and I decided to go with Aldo Greco, a guy that was very good for us, Titans all-time points leader. I just thought he deserved a little bit of credit, and I knew that you guys would show Rob on the list. So,
yeah, I've got Rob, and it's solely because Al pissed me off missing some big kicks over his career. He definitely was our kicker for a long time, and he was the reason we won a lot of games because we couldn't get the ball in the end zone for a bunch of his career. But I couldn't make him over Rob because I trusted Rob as my kicker more.
When you think of a Titans kicker, you obviously think Rob Barones. Al Del Greco, to me, is more of an Oiler than he was a Titan. The Rob Barones, obviously, at the time, I believe he hit a 63. What was it? He broke a record at the time. I know it's been broken since then.
He tied the record at 63, yeah.
Yeah. Hands down, when I think of a Titans kicker, that's who I go to.
And that's part of the reason for me, too, is, like I said, Al pissed me off a bunch, but mostly he pissed me off a bunch as an Oiler. Rob is the Titans kicker for the longest time. He had to be the guy for me.
I do like the 1 bar Gary Anderson helmet, though. I'll give him honorable mention.
All right, and then punter, I think we're all going to have the same answer here. And Craig Hendrick. Did anybody have anything but him?
Brett Kern. No, Craig Hendrick.
It's Hendrick, the first $1 million punter. He's got to be the guy right now. I don't think there's anybody else who is in that conversation.
No, he 12 or 13 seasons with us?
Yeah.
I mean, that's obvious.
Is it, Matt?
It is.
You're right, it is.
Thank you.
3 guys on my list for kick returner. Pac-Man Jones being one of them. I know he was only here for that year and a half, but a guy that was an electrifying punt returner. And then after him would be Derek Mason, who was a very good kick returner in his time here, and then Courtney Roby as well, who seems like the only thing that he excelled at was kick returning. But those are my 3 guys. Who'd you have?
I had the top two there, the Pac-Man Jones and Derek Mason. Again, I was going to use the same word that you used for Pac-Man. He wasn't here very long, but he was electrifying. He was a guy that every time that ball got kicked off, you didn't know if he was going to score. He's the closest thing we've had to a great kick returner. My next guy is Derek Mason because he's the best kick returner over any extended period of time that we've had. There's a few other guys that have done well for us, but after these two guys, it goes back to like Mel Gray for me, and that's back in the Oilers days. So we're talking Pac-Man Jones, Derek Mason. Were the only two guys I put on here. Nothing wrong with Roby, but I didn't necessarily feel like I needed three.
I went with Pac-Man Jones as my number one. Obviously, biggest scumbag in the league right now, but at the same time, for what you guys said, very dynamic, could easily get up the field with one quick move and he's gone. Second, I went with Mark Mariani simply because he came out of the gate as a rookie. Nobody knew who he was. He was actually drafted when we had Jeff Fisher. Jeff Fisher's son and Mariani played together at Montana, and I think that's the only reason anyone knew who he was. And obviously, with him coming back this past season, not really doing anything special. I don't think he'll be back by any means, but even though it's a small sample size, he did make Pro Bowl his rookie year returning kicks, so he definitely got the nod for me at number two.
Yeah, and he kept us from putting running backs back there who fumbled the ball into the damn end zone.
That's Ryan's boy, Darius Renaud.
Yeah. I'm just,
Oh, yeah.
I am happy having a perfectly average kick returner. If you don't have someone who can score a touchdown every time he touches it, just put somebody down there who's not stupid. Just remove the incredible mistakes that we've been making on special teams for the last several years, and just put somebody back there who at least understands my job is to catch the fucking ball, not fumble it, not step backwards into the end zone. Just catch the ball, get up the field, get what you can, fall down.
Dude, I'm telling you, and I agree with you, but reliability is the biggest thing when it comes to returning punts and kicks. But when you got a guy like Tyreek Hill with that kind of speed, I miss that so bad. Like,
no question.
Mariani's done a good job this year of holding on to the ball and making smart plays, but he made no extra effort, and I miss that personally. I think we can add that dynamic to this team. I think we'll be, well off.
Absolutely. I don't want him to be our kick returner next year. I'm just glad our kick returner this year compared to the other options that we had. Yeah. We had no better option. I really, really hope that in the offseason we come up with a guy who can score as a kick returner. We're probably not going to find Tyreek Hill out there. That dude is amazing. But if we can find somebody who at least is, other teams aren't going, all right, well, everybody jog down the field and tackle the dude. Or get down the field because he's probably going to drop the ball and you can score. I don't want that to be the conversation that they're having.
Well, I believe that's it, gentlemen.
Yeah, I was just going to say I left Mariani off my list, and the reason being is he's just no risk, no reward kind of a guy. He's going to get the ball, he's going to catch the ball, he's not going to make stupid mistakes. But he's going to average like 3 yards on a punt return.
Well, that's this season.
That's this season. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, but he never really. I mean, even when he was like at his peak, he was. He was really good, but he wasn't a guy that you weren't. Every time he caught the ball, you weren't like, "Oh, he's going."
He was no Devin Hester.
No, he didn't have that speed, but he could get up. Dude, he returned. I don't know how many he returned. I don't have the stats in front of me, but as a rookie, man, he was electric. And I don't know if you recall the play where he broke his leg. Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm.
That shit was disgusting. that was, I'm surprised he's like walking, let alone playing football again. But
just for the horror of that happening on the field and him coming back to play for us again. An honorable mention.
Absolutely, I still remember that, man. That was nasty.
Yeah, that was a brutal break, man. But yeah, not on my list.
He's good, but fuck him.
He's good, but he's not good enough. Now, I say that you could take this team that we put together here and put it on Madden and have an awful lot of fun. You can't throw the ball to the receivers, and you can't stop the other team from scoring with theirs. But you got to run the ball, you got to throw to the tight ends, and you're going to blitz the quarterback really well.
Listen, nobody is running on Curse, Casey, Hainsworth, and put whoever the hell you want next to fucking Hainsworth, and we'll be
Glenn
all right.
Lotzenheiser.
Yeah.
Next to those guys, I got this.
Imagine that D-line: Casey, Hainsworth, Curse, and like KVB.
Yeah, no shit. That's what I'm saying, man. You put this on Madden, no one's running the ball. They're just going to throw it at your corners all day long because they don't dare do anything else.
You know what I did there? I basically named the Kerry Collins team, except for obviously Jarrell Casey wasn't on it. It was Tony Brown instead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that again, we've had some really good teams over the years that couldn't get it done. We just didn't have a complete team. And the fact that we made the Super Bowl with that group of receivers and that group of cornerbacks is pretty damned impressive.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's a new era now. We got a lot to look forward to, and I think some of these guys are going to eventually get bumped off our lists.
Mike Williams.
I'll take it.
Yeah, I want cornerbacks. I want receivers who are exciting, and I want to not suck at everything else.
I think, honestly, what we should do, and I think this is a good later on in the draft kind of plan. We talked about this before, but I think we should probably, as our third running back, take somebody that will be returning some kicks.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
2 birds, 1 stone. Let's get it.
Someone who can return kicks and play at any position is fine with me.
True.
We need a kick returner. We need someone who can catch the ball that can actually do something with it once he does. And we need someone who can stop the other team from catching the ball every damn time.
Yeah.
Turn your head!
Right.
We're going to have a whole new section of the combine, just how far you can twist your head around. Neck flexibility, that's going to be the thing.
It's all about the neck and the hips.
Yeah, I was going to say, Ryan's out there checking out everybody, asking how their hips are moving. I'm out there looking at their neck. It's like, twist your head, man, twist your head.
All right, that's all we have for this
Steve.
show. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Thanks for Matt and Glenn, and especially Matt coming up with that great idea. It was a lot of fun to go through. Maybe a little bit down the road we'll do an all Oilers edition of this. By the way, also, if you have any ideas that you think would be good for the show during the off season, we're open to anything, open to ideas. We have some stuff planned down the pipe, but always need ideas. So if you have any ideas that you would like to hear, stuff that you want to hear as a fan of the show, as a fan of this team, definitely reach out to us. Facebook message us, direct message us on Twitter. Get it out to us so we can know exactly what our fans would like to hear, and we can do some stuff that you guys would find really interesting. And again, thanks for listening to the show. Thanks for everybody who sends stuff in. Everybody have a great night. We'll be back next week. All right, go to hang10.com. The code's 2-tone. Get your shit.
hangtn.com.
Podbean.
iTunes. Kevin Mawahe has to be the guy, I think, as your number one. Behind him as my...
Yeah. Did you just call him
Hawaii? like Hawaii? Hawaii?
Fuck you guys.
Thanks for listening to the Two-Tone Uncensored podcast. You can listen to the show at twotoneuncensored.podbean.com or by downloading the Podbean app on your mobile device. Be sure to follow the show on Twitter at Two-Tone Uncensored and like us on Facebook.